The Houston Texans have talked to a bunch of different players in the draft process. Does the position of these players give us a hint of what the Texans might be looking for in the draft? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. And I put together a little spreadsheet of all the players that I can find the Texans talk to in some way, shape, or form here in the draft process. Now, it's not fully complete. Inevitably, I'll miss a player here or there. But I have 65 names between my own reporting, the reporting of Aaron Wilson at KPRC, and the reporting of WalterFootball.com. 65 names that the Texans have talked to in the draft process. And, well, let's take a look at them. So here's the spreadsheet that I put together here. And it's got 65 names, as I mentioned, and it is split across these position groups. And I got a little fancy and color-coded a little bit of this, for the cornerbacks, coral blue, for defensive ends, dark green, defensive tackles, dark blue, linebackers, lime green. Maybe I got a little too fancy with that, but let's take a look at some of these positions, the density of these conversations, and where the Texans might be headed in the draft because of these conversations. Now, right away, double-digit numbers at cornerback, wide receiver, and safety. Now, let's take a look at this cornerback situation first and some of these names. Right away, I can tell you that Terrion Arnold from Alabama, Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, and Nate Wiggins from Clemson are not likely to be a part of the potential draftees by the Houston Texans. All four of those players set to go in the first round in the 2024 NFL Draft. So I don't believe the Texans will have a shot at those players. But they talked to Cam Hart at the Senior Bowl, and I think followed up with him at the NFL Scouting Combine. That's a player that maybe is in the third round, maybe in the fourth round, would be an interesting name. They talked to Kalen King at the Senior Bowl. Kamari Lassiter met with them at the NFL Scouting Combine. Enos Rakestraw Jr. is an interesting name. Thought of as kind of that fifth cornerback in some people's eyes, fifth or sixth cornerback. Could he be there in the second round for the Texans? Mike Sanderstrill, we talked about him earlier this week when we went through Mel Kiper's mock draft, the nickel specialist. The Texans talked to him at the NFL Scouting Combine. Quantez Stiggers is an interesting name. He played Canadian football last year. Aaron Wilson reported the Texans talked to him earlier in April. Desmond James is another interesting name. A slight-framed cornerback, probably a mid-round guy as well, but had some success in the SEC. So a lot of cornerbacks, but a lot of those conversations happened prior to free agency, prior to the Texans adding a bunch of different cornerbacks to the equation, bringing some guys back as well. So I don't feel like this is as much of an emphasis as the amount of visits would have you believe. Look, 11 out of 65, but a lot of these guys are not going to be available. And I think with the addition of Jeff Okudah, with the addition of C.J. Henderson, bringing back Desmond King, a lot of these guys maybe are less important and less of an emphasis for the Texans. Now, the safety spot, let's go down there. And I know I scrolled past that quite a bit there for you. There's a lot of safeties that they've talked to and guys that are set to go in a variety of rounds. There's probably no first-round safety this year unless you count Cooper DeJean from Iowa as kind of a safety, and he might go in the first round. But a lot of second-round guys like Kalen Bullock. This week, KPRC, Aaron Wilson reporting that Javon Bullard met with the Texans. Mark Perry as well, a guy that they've talked to at some point. Now, again, these interviews, these players on this list are sometimes it's combine talks, sometimes it's Senior Bowl conversations, sometimes it's official visits at the combine, sometimes it's informal visits at the combine. It's just an idea of where the talent that the Texans have reportedly spoken with through the draft process is. But safety is absolutely a position that I could see the Texans investing a pick or maybe two, one early and one late in the draft, in to add some names to that room. You've got Jimmy Ward, who's set to be a free agent at the end of the year. Jalen Petrie still on this team. If he doesn't play well this season, he might be finishing up his time with the Texans. Eric Murray and MJ Stewart are backups for the team, but a lot of safeties in there, of course, makes it a little bit intriguing that they've talked to this many safeties. And then wide receiver gets less intriguing because since they've talked to some of these wide receivers, like Javon Baker was a conversation at the scouting combine. Same with Jamari Thrash and Xavier Worthy and Troy Franklin, Jacob Cowing from Arizona. Like, these names were combine conversations, and then they went and re-signed Noah Brown and they traded for Stephon Diggs. So these wide receivers maybe aren't as important or key to the equation as the amount and the number would have you believe. Again, 11 cornerbacks and 10 wide receivers, those are the two top numbers. I don't believe that's as important as 10 safeties that they've had some sort of contact with reportedly in the draft process. Another position that's pretty high, 7 defensive ends and 6 linebackers. No surprise there. DeMeco Ryans with the front 7 and the emphasis that he has is a pretty intriguing idea with some of these defensive ends and linebackers. Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M. I know a lot of people who've watched videos in the past are big fans of him. Tommy Eichenberg is a name that is really intriguing to me because he's a mid-round pick, maybe a late-round pick. He's in the same vein as Henry To'oTo'o, but that between the ears that is so intriguing and interesting to coaches has to be something that has Eichenberg on the radars. He talked to the Texans at the scouting combine. Peyton Wilson is the most athletic linebacker in this draft. The injury concerns scare me a little bit, the injury history that he's had, but he was fantastic and healthy this past season in the ACC. And at his rival school, Cedric Gray is a guy that I really liked talking to at the Senior Bowl. He met with the Texans at the Senior Bowl and at the scouting combine as well. He's a player that's a mid-round selection that's kind of intriguing. But these defensive end names are interesting to me. Darius Robinson, the scouting combine and the meeting at the Senior Bowl, he's a fringe first-rounder, so maybe that's a guy the Texans would be interested in. He can play a little defensive tackle as well. Jalen Harrell's a late-round guy. Braylon Trice is a mid-round guy. Marshawn Kneeland, the Western Michigan product, is a guy who's gotten a lot of buzz recently. Aaron Wilson reporting the Texans met with Kneeland recently. And that's an intriguing name because there's a lot of potential to him. Now, if you're thinking about the defensive end room, you've got Danielle Hunter, you've got Will Anderson, you've got Derek Barnett back. Perhaps Dylan Horton is set to play this year for the Texans as he's recovering from his cancer diagnosis. And then you've got Danico Autry as well. So you've got options at defensive end already. Well, if you're thinking about a guy like Kneeland who has a little potential to him, maybe needs to grow into it a little bit, that is an intriguing guy. That's probably the 42nd overall pick if you're going to get him. But it's not bad to have a lot of pass rush, and it's not bad to plan for the future of the pass rush as well. Like if your defensive end room, say a year from now, was Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson and Danico Autry and Marshawn Kneeland, and then a year after that, Danico Autry's gone, and then it's Will Anderson, Marshawn Kneeland, and then some veterans or something like that because Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry have moved on. You know, it's not the worst idea to plan for that. So some intriguing names there, defensive end. Just 2 defensive tackles. And this Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State visit with the Texans is scheduled, according to Aaron Wilson. And then Johnny Newton met with the Texans at the NFL Scouting Combine. That's what he told me when I asked him about it. For everybody thinking about the defensive tackle situation, only 2 contacts on the record right now. Now, I do believe the Texans talked to Braden Fisk. He said at the Combine, I've talked to just about every team. So with that, I have to believe they talked to Florida State defensive tackle Braden Fisk. But just 2 defensive tackles in the contact sheet that I've put together here, that was interesting to me. A couple of unique prospects here from an offensive line standpoint. Travis Glover is a late round, kind of a project guy. Makes sense if you have him grow into that swing tackle spot for the Texans. Outside linebacker is basically edge, and we've talked about Chop Robinson before. Jalen Ford is actually a little bit more linebacker than outside linebacker. So, you know, he's in the outside linebacker designation. but I probably should put him up here in the linebacker designation. Then Jalix Hunt is an edge guy as well. So that's an intriguing name. It's a Houston Christian guy. Houston Baptist, Houston Christian. I probably need to change that. It's Houston Christian now. But that's a name. You know, there's some project aspect to it. There's some projection to his game as well. A couple of the quarterbacks. And then the running backs, Ray Davis and Isaac Garindo are the two interesting names to me in the running back conversation. Aaron Wilson reporting both those guys met with the Texans, had visits. And so with that, they didn't talk to Davis when I talked to him at the Combine, but Davis is a guy, a lot of mileage on him, played a lot at Kentucky. That doesn't disqualify you, but he'd be sort of a battering ram, physical, tough runner that the Texans could trust. And then Garindo, he's a speed merchant. He's just a guy that's very, very fast. It hasn't always matched the speed, the workout speed hasn't always matched what it is on tape, as you hear scouts talk about that, but that's a name to keep an eye on. And I think I've talked about all these positions with the exception of tight end. And when it comes to the tight ends, you know, Cade Stover and Theo Johnson are those mid-round guys. Jaheim Bell from Florida State is getting a lot of love for his athleticism and some of the production he put together at Florida State when there were lots of options to throw to at Florida State. Keon Coleman's a draft pick potentially here in this draft from Florida State. So is Johnny Wilson. Athleticism is important at the tight end position, and Bell's one of the most athletic tight ends in this draft. Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona is a name that is pretty interesting. Very athletic, not as clean of a prospect. You need a little bit more seasoning. But if you had a guy there as the third tight end to get some seasoning behind Brevin Jordan and Dalton Schultz, that'd be an intriguing name as well. I still like Franklin, maybe Keon Coleman, and even Javon Baker at the wide receiver spot. Second round with the second selection in the second round, maybe even in the third round. And then 2 7th-round picks, 2 6th-round picks. I'd love Jordan Whittington on this team. That's a guy that'll do it all and lay his body on the line for the team. He was awesome at Texas. He did everything for the Longhorns. So there's a lot of different ways that this list could be interpreted. I don't want to put too much stock into it because, again, they visit with 11 cornerbacks and 10 wide receivers. They've got a bunch of cornerbacks on the team already. They've got a bunch of wide receivers, and certainly a 1, 2, 3 on the team already. But I did want to put that list together just to kind of give you an idea and give you a list of names that the Texans have at least talked to at some point. Again, this is my reporting, Aaron Wilson's reporting, and Walter Football's reporting. And some of these are simple conversations at the Senior Bowl. Some of these are official visits at the Scouting Combine. And some of these are visits where the player comes into town to visit with the team. All different levels. And we'll kind of parse out exactly which of those visits they were at a later date. But I wanted to get those 65 or so names on the table for you to at least think about when it comes to the Texans. You can already cross some of them off, and then you can sort of start to circle some of those names that might matter just a tiny bit more, knowing that the Texans have talked to them here in the draft process. What say you? What do you think of this list of names? Are there players on here that I didn't talk about that I need to pay a little bit more attention to? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll always keep trying to find more names that the Texans are linked to here in the draft process. On your way down to the comment section, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. A mock draft coming your way tomorrow, and I'm bringing a friend to the mock draft, so don't miss out on that. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I can't wait until we talk Texans again soon.